And we provide a lot of different services, and this is one of them. I'm a risk manager by trade, and therefore kind of a jack of all trades when it comes to safety and risk avoidance type information. And in this particular case, we're going to talk about preventing driver distractions this morning. It's a broad spectrum of information that is really at the top of the list for many insurance carriers right now. And the reason behind that is because it affects your workers' compensation rates. When you have a collision and someone gets hurt, you have workers' comp issues, you have automobile liability and automobile physical damage issues. You have potential general liability issues, and things that maybe even umbrella coverage issues. And all these things get affected by how your employees are driving for your company. Therefore, driver distractions is a big deal to me, and we'll get into this just a little bit more. I have a personal story to tell about my son getting involved in a horrible collision, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. So this is a subject that is very personal to me, and it's something that I take very seriously. So, and I'll talk about some of the things that I do and some of the best practices that I have for companies trying to juggle this driver distraction. Can everybody see the starting slide there with preventing driver distractions? Anybody have issues with that?
I can see that. I can see it.
Always have the training disclaimer in there that I don't pretend to know everything, and obviously we have a couple of states involved here, so I'll try to keep my comments general. That are there may be some specific laws in your state that may be a little bit different than what this presentation was provided for, but the concepts of risk avoidance in this particular situation is a very universal theme. Be sure that you guys have had a chance to sign in. I provided a sign-in sheet, and I hope that got transferred to you. You guys may have your own sign-in capabilities and your own sign-in sheets. Please, whatever you came up with, please sign in and show that you attended this. It is something that insurance companies want to see, is that you're seeing this type of information and we're having a discussion about it. Now, your driver safety policy that you currently have is something that should be discussed and should be gone over fairly frequently. And it's something that I asked to have forwarded to me so that we could have this discussion. So I'm going to bring that into the screen right now. And let's talk about this policy just a minute, touch on some of the highlights. Can you see that okay? Basically, this policy covers all drivers that drive for your company, ECHELON. Just understand that these things that are in this policy are what you will be held accountable for, what your employees are held accountable for. And sometimes it's good to talk about these things because you just hadn't thought about them since the day you were hired. And it's something to bring back to the top of the table here and have a discussion. Understand that you have drug and alcohol testing within your facility that can be done for cause. And we'll discuss in a minute what this means and that sort of thing and what this policy provides. We'll go into that a little bit more later. Insurance requirements. This is for those of you that drive your personal vehicle as a routine for company business. You understand that you must provide your own automobile insurance for your own vehicle. This is your personal vehicle. Understand that these rules that we're going to talk about apply to you while you're on company business. And yes, the company can tell you what the rules are for your personal vehicle while you're in the course and scope of your duties for ECHELON. So let's have this discussion here a minute about what are the requirements. Requirements are you will always wear a seatbelt. You'll drive defensively. You'll obey the traffic laws that are in your particular area. And by the way, those change depending on where you travel to. You can go from one city to the next city without even realizing it, and the traffic rules and some of the traffic local ordinances change. So be sure you're well aware of those. If you're unsure about those, I would spend some time looking them up if you frequent other towns and other locations, especially out of state. Watch for those situations. Always lock your vehicle during long trip. Takes breaks every 4 hours. We're talking about somebody on the road for company business. Take a short break, get out, walk around the vehicle, never drive more than 10 hours in a 24-hour period. When possible, avoid driving after midnight. Now, this is always a good idea, no matter whether it's in your personal life or in your company business, but nothing good happens after midnight on the roadway. Avoid driving in dangerous conditions. Traffic violations. Understand that when you are driving on company business, whether you're in your personal vehicle or an ECHELON vehicle, you are responsible for any violation, parking tickets, or any kind of violation of city ordinance, state or federal. So yes, you can be driving a company vehicle. ECHELON will receive that ticket in the mail, and you're going to be responsible for it as an employee. Refueling guidelines, just be safe around that part and don't, everybody sees the signs and they know what to do. Just don't hold your cell phone in your hand while you're doing it, and don't smoke while you're doing that, obviously. Now, let's talk about distracted driving. We'll get into more detail later, but this policy is very clear. Use of cell phones while driving is strictly prohibited. That statement alone does not leave any leeway. Okay, you need to understand this. If you're texting or you're on your phone doing whatever you're doing and something bad happens, you're going to be outside of the policy of this company. Okay, it's hard to support employees that don't follow the rules. So this makes it very clear where that line is drawn. Use of any electronic devices such as laptops. I know some companies have gone to laptops, they've gone to tablets, many different things to get their job done. Just be sure you're using those while the vehicle is stopped and parked and pulled over to the side of the road. Okay. Voicemail must be handled on calls. It should be directed directly to voicemail. And I'll tell you this, the next to the last one there, regular callers must be informed that you're unavailable. I promise you that everyone knows if they call me and I do not answer, either I'm on the other line, I'm talking to somebody else, or I'm driving. And they know I will get back to them in a few minutes. They always leave a quick voicemail. This is Joe from the office. Please call me back in just a few minutes. When it's safe, they know I'm not going to talk on the phone while I'm driving. Everybody knows that. My family knows it. My kids know it. My relatives know it. I've told everyone, if I don't answer you, it's not personal, okay? I will call you back in just a minute or two, okay, as soon as I can get pulled over. So be sure your coworkers, your family, everybody knows you're not going to answer that. Now, headsets and hand-free device use, the only time you can use these if they've been pre-approved by ECHELON, and that's something that's important. The reason for that is you just don't want somebody driving around with headphones on or something like that. We need to know what you are using. Any dialing and using of that handset, you need to be pulled over or stopped while you're doing that. Make sure that your communications and conversations while you're in a vehicle don't interfere with the driver's ability to drive. What I mean by that, 2 or 3 of you are going to a location to do some training. And let me tell you, this goes on more often than not. Everybody's gabbing. If the driver is driving through a construction zone, a heavy traffic area, something where things have changed recently, and it is very difficult for the driver to pay attention, everybody needs to be quiet, not talk through that area. This is something that is a huge distraction. Let the driver do their job. Okay, wait till you get to the other side of the construction, the other side of the area where there's a problem, whatever it is. Emergency calls, that's the only exception to the cell phone. You can place a 911 call and be behind the wheel. In Texas, that's allowed. I don't know about other states, but they usually have an exception in there. Those are extremely rare. If you use a GPS system like I do, I'm constantly out driving around areas I've not been in before, driving to small area towns that I've never been to. I need a GPS, and I use the automobile GPS, and you just don't need to be adjusting that, setting your destination, doing whatever, poking around on the dash while you're driving down the road. If you use a phone for that purpose, you can't be poking around on that phone while you're driving, okay? So just headphones for people that like to listen to music. This has been a problem for many, many years. I remember this problem. I've been doing insurance stuff and claims handling for larger organizations for 34 years. And I have continually seen this for almost the entirety of that 34 years. And I'll tell you, employees want to listen to music. And if they can't listen to it on their vehicle, they'll stick it in their ear. They'll have one in and one out for their music. Understand that for music purposes and listening to music like that, you can't have that stuck to your head and you can't be listening. This prohibited behavior, driving while under the influence of drugs and alcohol. That's become a hot topic of late, in that some states have legalized certain substances. And I will tell you that it doesn't matter what state you live in. It doesn't matter what part of the country you live in, or the local ordinances where you live and where you're driving. You are not allowed to drive while you're under the influence of any drugs or alcohol. And what that means is, are you impaired? If you're impaired, you can't be behind the wheel. I have seen over-the-counter medication become an issue where a driver is impaired behind the wheel. And we're talking OTC medication that they bought from their local pharmacy. Perfectly legal to take, but in their circumstance, it was causing the driver to be impaired. I saw a horrible accident on that one time. It was absolutely heartbreaking what happened in that accident, and it was OTC medication that did it. Also seen drugs that were intended for someone else that you may be taking. Keep in mind, you can't take someone else's medication. It may be a valid prescription for your spouse or your significant other, but if you take it, it's an illegal substance. Understand that. If you commit any of these other issues, like operating a company vehicle with a suspended license, using a motor vehicle to cause some other issues, be charged with reckless driving, hit and run, things like that will get you either suspended or terminated from the company. You have to understand there are issues, and this number of convictions, 3 or more traffic violations, things like that. Your company checks your MVR, your motor vehicle record for your state that you're operating out of. They're looking for at-fault traffic violations that you've been cited for. This is all the more reason for keeping your driving habits in good shape, whether you're on the job or not. These could count up to the point cause problems for you and your organization. The employee acknowledgement at the end is something you signed when you came to work for ECHELON. I just want to make sure that you understand what was in there. And I was the drug and alcohol program manager for an entity that had 2,000 employees. And I can tell you, I've seen it all, or I thought I had. I have seen some crazy stuff. And so I'll tell you that the issue of impaired driving is an issue. It can be a lot of different things. Impaired driving could be have nothing to do with something that the person has taken. It could be a life situation. I'm telling you, I had a situation one time where an employee was out on a job site approximately 120 miles from our location, found out that they had lost a parent. They had lost a parent just a few minutes earlier in a traffic accident. I'm sorry, that employee is impaired to drive back to your organization. They have no business being behind the wheel. That had nothing to do with drugs or alcohol, but they were impaired. So it's something you need to think about what's safe, what is safe to do out there, especially you supervisors, thinking about what you find out about employees and make sure they're good to go before you allow them behind the wheel. Does anybody have any questions about that policy before we move on? Very good. We'll get into a situation. This is what makes it personal for me. Is that back in April of 2017, I received a phone call. And it's that phone call that every parent has a nightmare about. Fortunately, in so many ways, it was my son that was on the phone. He called me and he said, "Dad," I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I've been in a bad accident." And I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "No." And I almost could not get the words out of my mouth to ask him, "Where are you?" And the following sentence to this day still strikes fear in me, because he said, "I don't know." And that just struck me. I'm telling you, when you've got a son, when you've got somebody close to you that's been in an accident, they tell you they are hurt and they don't know where they're at. I'm telling you, that is some situation where you'll lose years off your life. And I promise you, I lost quite a few years off my life. This first picture you see right here is from the passenger side of this pickup. My son was sitting in that right front seat. He was a passenger in this pickup, and it struck the back of an 18-wheeler that had a cattle feeding truck on the trailer on the back. Notice in the lower right-hand corner, the wheel that's laying there, that's the wheel that used to be the right front wheel of this pickup. It has been severed completely off. The engine was pushed up into the passenger compartment and pushed the dash up onto my son. And his right leg, he had crossed up and over on his left leg. He was on his phone, probably not paying attention either, but as a passenger, I guess, you know, people do that. And his knee was forced up to his neck. Wow. His right knee was forced up to his neck and broken in 4 places. Here's another look at it from a little different angle. My son's still in this pickup at this point. It took them about an hour and a half from the time they were notified, the local authorities were notified, until they finally got him out of this vehicle. Had it not been for the pressure of that dashboard on his chest and on his right leg, he would have bled out within about 2 minutes on the site. He would have died. So can we say that that was a very close call? Yes, we certainly can. But what caused this was the driver had 2 phones. His first phone was the company phone that was issued to him. The second phone was a personal phone. He had the personal phone out of his pocket in his left hand, driving down this road, not paying attention where he was going. In addition, this was, as you can tell, a caliche type road where it's kind of a dirt surface. That is not a paved road. And the dust was being kicked up by this truck and trailer combination that was going down the road. So he couldn't really see too well either. So not only was he distracted, but he couldn't see. He hit the back end of this truck after dodging a little to the left to get the driver out of the path of the truck, and put the passenger side right in that left rear corner of that trailer. But he was on his phone playing on Facebook, is what he was doing. He was posting things on Facebook. We were able to prove that. Now, one thing I'll point out is this is not the normal traveling route for this pickup to go to the particular destination they were going to. This was a side road, remote, in the middle of nowhere, I'll put it that way. And why do you think this driver was driving in the middle of nowhere, away from the main traffic flow? Anybody have any ideas? I will tell you that this guy's license had been suspended, and had been suspended more than 8 months prior to that for a DUI. Had completely had his license suspended. The company never did an MVR backgrounds on their employees. They would have never found it had he not run into the back end of this trailer. So that tells you why insurance companies want you to check MVRs and do it routinely. It's for employees like this. The sad part about it is supervisor knew his license had been suspended and sent him out in the truck anyway. It's a wonder that many lawsuits didn't come out of this. Direct physical costs on something like this: pickup was totaled, equipment was damaged, the trailer that he hit. The workers' comp claim as it stood when I wrote this up about a year ago was about $350,000 that it paid out. Ultimate claim value is probably going to be somewhere in the $500,000 range. The problem with workers' comp and an injury on the job like this is there's a lot of indirect costs. You have one employee off for, my son was off for about a year. The other employee was off for about 30 days. He did have one little minor fracture in his ankle. He really wasn't hurt too bad. But the bad part about this, service calls were delayed and canceled. They had reputation loss. Workers' comp experience factor went out the roof. Automobile coverage experience factor went out the roof. And of course, the 10 to 15 years I lost off my life from wondering if he was going to live for the next 2 days after this happened. So how do we get through to our employees that it's not okay to be distracted when they're driving? What can you do as an individual employee to reduce your risk of becoming a distracted driver? And why do distractions prevent or delay proper driving actions? We're going to go over all those here in just a second. This is some statistics from Texas. And I will tell you, I've looked this up in a half a dozen other states, and the statistics are not all that different. But I think this points to some really interesting statistics here. Does anybody have any input? Look how low the fatality rate was in Texas, 2009 through 2011. The first thing in my risk management mind goes straight to what happened in 2011 to cause the fatality rate to start to increase. It makes you stop and wonder. Some of the things that I think if you dig into this a great deal and dig through all the statistics, you'll find out that a lot of formidable GPS systems for cars and infotainment systems that are in cars became a little more widely involved in the vehicles and included in vehicles starting about 2010. They were only in the luxury vehicles prior to 2009. You just didn't see very many out there. There were a few, there just weren't very many. 2011 started to be the kind of the revolution of the infotainment system in a vehicle and what all the vehicle was capable of. It was also when iPhones, Android phones, and a lot of these other phones became a lot more accepted in the workplace and started becoming a real thorn in the side of IT managers at work, trying to keep it off of their desk, their desktop at their work and at their regular workstation. 2010, 2011 is when the battle really started on that. And look how how steep the climb is, the increase is, the ascension of all these fatality rates here go straight out the roof. And by the way, I put 2019 death toll down at the bottom at 3610. That is something that just continues to hover around 36 to 3,700 vehicle crashes. Let me ask you, do you think fatality rates in your state have actually gone down during the pandemic last year for 2020, or do you think they've gone up? Most people don't know, but they've actually increased during the year of 2020. We've all heard and seen reports on the TV about people doing the cannonball run from coast to coast at record paces, and you've seen people get out there and drive, especially back in the first half of 2020 when everybody was at home pretty much, and the fatality rate went skyrocketing right out the roof because people were more likely to drive faster and drive distracted than they were prior years when the traffic was so heavy. That's kind of an interesting phenomenon. What are the three largest contributing factors to the huge increase in fatalities all the way up through 2020? They were driver distractions. Now in Texas, in 2017, lawmakers passed a bill that said it was illegal to text and drive. That took effect back in 2017. That may help drive down some. Local laws and local ordinances in certain towns here prohibit you even having one in your hand. There are some portions of the state that if they find you using it, they're going to write you, especially in school zones and other things. So yes, Texas has cracked down on it quite a bit, but not near as much as other states. There's been some other states that have really done a lot. Let's see what number 2 is. Driving under the influence. Driving under the influence of any type of substance or situation seems to be a big problem. and it's not going away. As a matter of fact, this problem is increasing. And it's not any one particular drug or alcohol. They're all increasing. Of course, the recent passing of marijuana doesn't help matters any, but I'm not going to pick on that one because that one has increased a little. Some of the other drugs have increased a tremendous amount. The last one is speeding, and seatbelt use was kind of tied for third. Is that not a recipe for disaster? Driving distracted, driving under the influence, speeding, and not wearing your seatbelt. My goodness, if we could control those 4 items a little bit better with our employees, the fatality rate would go down 60%. If you could somehow reduce the exposures on those 4 items. You would think seatbelt use is not an issue these days. It is still an issue. I went out to a fatality just a few years ago while I was still working for that other large entity, and went up to the driver's side door with the lady still in the front seat. She had passed, and the seat belt was tucked behind her. The shoulder strap was tucked behind her, and was buckled in below her. She was not wearing that seat belt, but to get the little dinger to quit dinging and bothering her, she'd clicked in it and jumped in and sat down on top of it. It cost her her life. I have been out to 7 fatalities similar to that myself, seen the aftermath, and I will tell you, these 3 factors are very common. Being under the influence is a big issue, and it continues to be a big issue. Distractions, we'll get into a little bit more specifically why that's an issue. Food and drink are a big issue right now. Paperwork, juggling schedules. Just real quickly, what are the 2 worst foods to have in your hand that are common for people to drive with? I'll put a caveat in there. The worst food is some kind of sandwich, like a hamburger or some kind of sandwich along that line, because pieces always fall out of that. The worst drink, besides alcohol, is that you're supposed to, that people are so common to have in a vehicle is coffee. Coffee is a big issue while you're driving. I know people that wouldn't leave the house without their hot coffee in their center console. That's actually a distraction. You drop that in your lap, you're not going to be still, and you're going to be all over the road. So that is an issue. You drop a cold drink in your lap, maybe not so much, but a hot drink, any kind of hot drink is an issue. Passengers, you got to have this discussion internally when there's more than one employee going. Don't let the passenger be an issue. Don't let them distract the driver. Rubbernecking and looking at accidents are a big issue. I've seen that cause accidents. But there's 4 basic distractions. You have the visual distractions, like rubbernecking. Somebody says, hey, look at this, while they're in the vehicle. You're looking over trying to fiddle with the radio or trying to fiddle with your GPS, whatever, your phone. Physical distractions, anything that takes one hand off the wheel and you're not in control of that vehicle. Cognitive distractions are where the rubber meets the road. This is, no pun intended, the distractions that cause a driver to think about something else is where the biggest issues are. Auditory distractions are some of the things I talked about earlier about that are also visual distractions. That's your coworkers in the vehicle. You got music playing, you got the radio going off. If you have a company radio, you've got lots of things that can distract you like that. Let's talk about some myths versus reality. This is a little article that was put together by a group that is really popular. You'll see it at the end. Myth versus reality. The reality The myth is that you can do multiple things at one time while you're driving. You can talk on the phone and drive. That's a myth. The reality is the human brain cannot do two highly cognitive things at the same time. It simply cannot do that. What it does is your brain will switch from this task to that task. And your brain is on autopilot while you're talking on the phone. Your brain is on autopilot. We'll talk about autopilot in just a minute, what that means. Myth number 2, talking on a cell phone is just like speaking to a passenger. It is not the same. It is quite distracting, obviously, but it's not the same. People on the phone cannot see your facial expressions. They cannot see your hand movement, whatever it is that you may be adding to the conversation. You can't tell what the person on the other end of the phone is really, what their facial expression is. And on top of that, a passenger can actually be an extra set of eyes to help you look out for things on the roadway. Speaking with a hands-free device is just as safe while I'm driving. It is not. When you are on a phone call, you miss about at least 50% of what's going on in your driver's environment. And I've got another illustration of this in a few minutes that I'll spend a little bit more time on. But you see in this illustration in the top half of the screen here, where the blue shaded area, the darkened area, is something that this person can't see or doesn't recognize or does not compute while they're on the phone, only seeing the lighter portion in the middle of the windshield. Myth number 4, only use my cell phone at stoplights. So that's got to be okay. Well, the AAA did a large, long study. And I have read it, by the way. It's many pages long, but it says that you stay distracted after sending a text, even setting at a light, you stay distracted for up to 27 seconds after you finish sending either a voice text or any other type of text. So this is why you shouldn't be sitting at a light texting and fiddling with your phone. The depiction there shows one vehicle rear ending the other vehicle. That's a real common occurrence. People just won't go when they're sitting at a light piddling with their phone. I hate that. Light turns green, go. The other one, voice to text, is safe to do while I'm driving. It's not, because what happens is voice to text is not 100% accurate. It is not accurate. It's pretty good and it's getting better, but it's not accurate. So, so you're always constantly looking over, you're constantly trying to autocorrect, whatever, trying to fix things before it actually goes out and gets sent. So it's actually a huge distraction to use voice to text. So that's not a good deal either. So let's talk about this cognitive distraction. I spent quite a bit of time here putting a lot of data in here, and I'm not going to go read it word for word, but estimates indicate that the driver's cell phone they're looking down the road, but they fail to see 50%. This is called inattention blindness. This is that automatic pilot that kicks in when you get on the phone. All of a sudden, you don't see everything that's in front of you. The cognitive part of the brain is busy with the conversation, and the driver's on autopilot. Unfortunately, this autopilot is extremely poor at driving and making critical decisions in a timely fashion. What I mean by that, a hazard comes into the view, your brain takes several seconds to switch gears from the phone conversation to recognizing the hazard, assessing the hazard, and then taking appropriate evasive action. You got to go through all 3 steps as a driver when a hazard shows up. If you're not on the phone and you're not having a conversation, those 3 steps can happen very quickly. Once you're on a phone, it delays that reaction time considerably. Okay, hands-free devices most often used. You see different versions of it. The top one on the left side there is one you just clip to your visor. That was for cars that didn't handle cell phone calls very well. There's the Bluetooth cell phone device there in the bottom right-hand corner. It's just important for you to understand, even though it may be allowed in some circumstances, I will tell you this is to be avoided, because you're still, even though it eliminated one of the distractions, which is your hand being held up to the side of your face and that phone blocking that part of your vision, it does not solve the cognitive function part of this. Now, this picture was taken from the National Safety Council did a study, and I very clearly blurred these a little bit so that you couldn't tell exactly where it was at or what was going on, but just enough you can see what we're talking about. The picture on the left is a person driving and their normal field of vision. They're seeing the traffic in the left lane. They're seeing the curb on the right-hand lane. They're seeing all this information. Then someone places a phone call and you answer that phone call. The right-hand picture is your focus of attention is now on a spot that's roughly 12 inches wide and 12 inches tall. Anything happens outside of that area, you cannot respond to. Your brain physically cannot switch quick enough to respond to anything outside of that bright red triangle on the right-hand side. A lot can happen outside of that you need to respond to. So this is why the cognitive part of the brain actually switches over, goes to autopilot. And I can't tell you how many times in my career, I live out in the country now, it's not a big deal, but back when I lived in town and I lived in an apartment, I would leave the apartment complex, pull out onto the roadway and be driving down the road and think to myself, did I stop at that stop sign before I drove out of the apartment complex? And I have no idea whether I did or didn't. You were on autopilot. Your brain was somewhere else. You go, man, I wonder if I stopped at that last stop sign. That's because your brain's somewhere else. That's the point in time you need to stop. Maybe get out of your car for a minute, have a discussion about you're going to keep your brain and your focus on your driving. Here's an example of a accident that happened. This one's been in the news many times. Back in 2004, when cell phones first came on the scene, there was this really heart-wrenching story about a 12-year-old boy getting killed at an intersection. And I'll not go into all the details, but the police investigation was able to determine that the driver, now get this, you're driving in 3 lanes of traffic, okay? There is a left turn lane, there is a center lane, and there is a right lane on this road. I have looked at the diagram. I'm just recounting what this was. This person was driving in the center lane, coming up to a red light. In the left turn lane, there was a bus stopped in the left turn lane on a red light, waiting for a left arrow, protected arrow. There was a vehicle in the right-hand lane stopped at the red light. There was cross traffic going across this intersection. They had the green light. This driver drove straight through this intersection and collided and T-boned a car and killed this little 12-year-old boy that was sitting in the right front seat of this car. And this particular case was cited as one of the cognitive distraction cases that has been really advertised as a classic example of looking and not seeing, just not understanding because this person had every clue in the world what was going on in front of them, and yet they failed to stop. And that's because of the cognitive autopilot that they were on. Okay. So let's get into prevention. We're almost done here. Drivers can help avoiding this by informing frequent callers that they're just not going to participate in a phone conversation while you're driving. Put your phone down, follow the rules. Don't eat or drink while you're driving. I just recommend that in any situation. You need to eat or drink, get off the roadway and do it. Legislative law changes will occur, and I think things are changing on a monthly and annual basis in almost every state. Driver safety policies can be enforced, and I want you to hear me say that this needs to be a clear message to all employees, be effectively communicated, and be part of the core training. This is something that needs to be discussed frequently, at least a couple of times a year. High visibility enforcement, and this may involve someone getting in a lot of trouble for not wearing their seatbelt. Somebody may get in a lot of trouble for, I saw you on your cell phone, I'm writing you up type thing. Okay, it's got to be something where there are consequences. Technology solutions, there's a big move to try to come up with some kind of solution, and I'll tell you, they're fighting it. The companies that are making automobiles are fighting this tooth and nail, because you shut down the cell phone usage by the driver, you're shutting down cell phone usage for everybody in that car. And I will tell you that that is a problem when you have kids these days and you hand them both iPads in the back seat and you expect them, or their phones or whatever, and you expect them to be plugged in. You can't have no technology going down the road for everybody in the vehicle. So there's going to be a lot of infighting on this from the manufacturers. They want to increase the amount of technology that's in these cars. But I'll also tell you that I've got a car that I bought last year. It's a 2020 model. It's the first time in my life I've ever bought a brand new car. Never had done it before. This car has all kinds of safety features that my previous vehicles did not have. It tells me when I'm getting out of my lane. It gently pulls the steering wheel back and puts me in the middle of the lane. Things trying, that they're trying to do some things with technology to keep distracted drivers from being a menace out on the roadway. What's custom, what's the custom everyday practice in your organization? You have to stop and think about, are you calling your employees and expecting them to answer when they're on the roadway? Employee is driving from point A to point B today. Do you call them? Well, you may be part of the problem. So wait until they get there, send them a text, tell them, call me when you get there, whatever. Just take some other actions. You need to be promoting this on a consistent basis. All these things are direct symptoms of an accident in the making. Strengthen your policy and procedures, training on these new procedures, enforcement. All these things are part of the big picture. Does anybody have any questions for me? If you think of questions, my email's in the lower right-hand corner of this last slide, and I did provide that to you guys early on. If you think of questions, if you think of issues that have come up within your organization that you're having a hard time solving with the distracted driver issues, whatever the case may be, you let me know and I will help you come up with something that's reasonable within your organization. There are solutions, there are answers to a lot of questions. A lot of companies have tackled this many times in the past, have been very successful. So does anybody have any questions for me?
Jim, I'm good. I appreciate you taking the time and going over this with us.
You're welcome. And you guys let me know if you need any further training. I've got a lot of different subjects I can train on. Some of them are much shorter than this. So please keep that in mind. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're gonna go over all of our projects, like a team meeting, over in the conference room
Okay.
in like 2 minutes. So can you come join us?
Yes, as a matter of fact,
Bring your, bring your laptop so we can go over, actually print out, can you print out that? You already printed.
I need your help. Right now.